Welcome to Pitch It To Me Podcast, a show about the subjective past, present, and potential future of Flesh and Blood design. Today's episode will be about Lifegain in Flesh and Blood. You can find us across all socials, such as Bluesky and Instagram at Pitch It To Me Podcast.
I'm Fuzzy.
I'm Joel.
And I'm Clark.
All right, last episode on Pitch It To Me Podcast, we established that Joel had one more chance because he kept getting 9th place in all of his RTNs. He had one more chance. Joel, did you get 9th at the last RTN?
No.
Did you get 10th?
No.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah. I got first! That peaked so hard. I know. I didn't think about it.
Maybe we'll have to go back and see.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure if you screaming directly I peaked it or not.
I didn't know what I was going to say next. It just came out. I didn't think to move back before.
Bro, it was beautiful. Dude, we're so fucking happy for you.
Thank you so much.
It was a stacked RTN too.
Yeah, Kingslayer Games, our local armory, always has the best people in all of SoCal playing there.
So you got first place?
Yeah, I was in the finals against Tao Tao. It was like I had a really good lead, but he just was crawling back really efficiently, and it got down to 1-1.
No price splits or nothing?
Nope.
So you got the gold foil?
I got the gold foil too.
What gold foil? What did you get?
It was Metacarpus node.
That seems like a really good one.
Yeah, I was pretty hyped about it. I was really hoping for like a Centauri Saber or Raiden what would have been like made my day, but any Majestic I think is super gas. So
yeah, and that one's like really playable.
Yeah, so I'm hoping to cash that in for.
And Kano's never gonna LL, right?
Yeah, definitely not. I'm definitely selling it before he does.
At least Kano is still going to be good in Living Legend format.
Yeah.
That card's going to be good for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, so very glad that I got to get my invite out of the way. Well, not really, because I waited till the end of the season to do well. But yeah, super thankful for everyone who supported me at the RTN, because I had a very emotional first game of top 8. I went against Kano and just barely squeezed it out. So yeah, it was a big one. It meant a lot, for sure.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. You know what I can't wait for is this next Armory deck. I think there's one unannounced left, right?
Yeah, so to sort of keep the meta interesting is they're releasing one Armory deck each month leading up to High Seas. So the one in March is going to be the Aurora, and then the one in April is going to be Max, and then we don't know the one that's coming in May yet. And because they did Aurora, I'm thinking, do you guys think they're going to do Terra?
Oh, that would be freaking cool. Not going to lie.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know what it was exactly, but I remember just getting this feeling as maybe I was watching the First Strike stuff or listening to other content creators talk about the Aurora Armory deck, where I'm just like, I feel like they're going to do the Terra one. I think we need the Red Flourish. In the way that we got the Red Static Shock. I feel like we need, play sets of, or a playset of Thrives, right? These, or even just the Earthbond stuff, which I think could even be really interesting cards to incorporate into a more Earth-oriented Jarl list.
Yeah.
Or, no, they're all Earth Guardian, yeah. Or Elemental Guardian. So, or maybe a Starvo list?
I think it would be kind of crazy if, out of the 2 new heroes printed straight out of Armory decks, they're both Guardian, I'd kind of want to see a little bit, some other heroes. Because Jarl was the first one,
yeah, we did get Jarl.
And granted, Jarl is, totally new, whereas Terra has already been printed in Blitz,
Yeah, I don't think this would be an Armory deck Origins, because the whole point of Armory deck Origins is that they also print, a bunch of Majestics and a Legendary specifically for that one hero.
So it would be, the first time we see the hero in CC, but also it's not Armory deck Origins? So is it? Yeah. It's just a normal Armory deck?
I think it would just be a normal Armory deck.
I think there's less logistical sense because it's not the Origins and he's already existed before. To me, I think it would make the most sense because a while ago, Berserk and Crown of Seeds banned were banned in tandem, and a lot of people suspected that Verdance and Florian were the reasons why they banned Crown of Seeds ahead of time, ahead of Rosetta's release. But I think if this next armory deck could be Terra, it's because of Terra. Because his hero ability allows him to, whenever he has a floating resource at the end of his turn, he can pay 1 to create a might token. And so if you have like Crown of Seeds and Rampart, you'll always have that 1 extra for a might token.
Add in like some Oasis respites or like 1-cost instant stuff, and like you can just run away with the game.
Yeah.
So this episode's going to be about Lifegain and Flesh and Blood. And a lot of it's inspired by some recent thoughts that Joel's been having, because Joel has been a vocal hater on Lifegain. I think a few episodes ago, he kind of just like threw a hot take out there in the middle of our episode, kind of non sequitur like, where he said that like all Lifegain should be banned. I think that was your words, Joel.
Yeah, you did that.
That sounds like something I would say, but I do not recall.
It was definitely like one of those in conversation comments, right?
Yeah.
So we took that out and we made sure to base a whole episode around it. And also, Lifegain is just a consistent topic that's going to come up again and again in the lifetime of Flesh and Blood.
Yeah. So for today, Red Pitch, we're going to talk about like some of the basic design principles of Lifegain, what can make it good, what can make it bad. In Yellow Pitch, Joel's going to give us some more of his nuanced thoughts specifically, and Clark and I will eat some popcorn and listen up. And on Blue Pitch, we're going to talk about like the future of Lifegain in the game, where we think LSS might go in the future, what could be printed in the future around Lifegain, stuff like that. And then I'll stick around for our Arsenal Zone at the end.
Yeah, Fuzzy, what do you got? Why don't you start us off?
So for Red Pitch, we've decided to call this Live, Laugh, Lifegain. So let's talk about some of like the pros and cons of Lifegain and Flesh and Blood. I think most trading card games like to play around with Lifegain, you know? If I can take damage, why can't I heal some of that damage back? It's a fun mechanic to play around. Easy for a designer to use in order to flesh out the design of their game, right? In Flesh and Blood, because there's no board states, because the life totals can be so back and forth, we get some really like interesting dynamics where Lifegain can interact with the game in that it wouldn't in other games. For these first couple of bullet points, I want you to think of Lifegain in a very simplistic state. In one hand, you have a block 3, and the other hand, you have Sigil of Solace. Why would I want a block 3 versus an instant that gains me 3 life but doesn't block? The block card will allow me to stop on hits, right? If someone comes at me with a snatch, I want to block the snatch to deny value, or a Leave No Witnesses, or a Command and Conquer. Sigil of Solace cannot block any of those cards, whereas a block 3 will be able to. So Lifegain is a little bit worse than blocking if it's not going to be able to stop on hits. Whereas the block 3 is really bad for stopping things like a Harmonized Kodachi. If your opponent's throwing lots of chip damage at you, like 1 damage, 2 damage, maybe they have a bunch of those spectral shields or a bunch of little auras, then Lifegain can be really good for helping you fight those strategies because you can split the defensive value across multiple points of damage. Of course, there's also things like arcane damage, where arcane damage threatens your life total in a way that you cannot block it simply. So you can run Lifegain in order to counter that arcane damage. And that's a concept we see very explicitly in the Rosetta limited format. We just saw cards like Arcane Polarity or even Fertile Ground printed into the set in order to give you a way to combat arcane damage where there's no arcane barrier in the format.
Yeah. Which, to remind viewers, we really liked that design aspect and how they played around being able to deal with arcane damage through Lifegain in that limited format.
I think in this case, we as 2. Just want to point that out. Just kidding.
Yeah, I know that Ryan Gottlieb has said on podcasts that he liked Tales of Aria as a format because the arcane damage allows the game to end. You want games to end in Flesh and Blood. You don't want them to be super grindy and last forever.
So true.
And if you can't actually block the arcane damage, that's one way to make sure that happens. However, in Constructed, Lifegain usually extends the game. If you're playing Lifegain in Constructed, what we usually see is it's a way for you to be super defensive. Think about like a block card, you have to throw it in front of an attack. It is a interaction with your opponent. It is a response. And if they're not throwing attacks at you, your block cards are not going to be able to be used for blocking. You'll have to either play them, or if they're literally block cards, they're stuck in hand. I know, Clark, you've ranted all the time about playing Victor and getting stuck with all of your test of strengths.
Yeah. Just IP1 myself so I can keep my test of strength in hand. Yeah.
Whereas a card like Count Your Blessings or Sigil of Solace, I can always play that card regardless of what my opponent is doing. If my opponent just chooses to pass to me without throwing any attacks, well, I can still build my defenses up. I can play them even if my opponent's not throwing any offense. It's kind of like passive defensive.
Yes. Now, this is also notably things that other games have run into issues for. One very famous example is Elder Dragon Highlander, aka Commander. Back in the day, commander damage didn't used to be a rule that existed in that format. And then some games just said, well, I'm going to gain thousands upon thousands of life and the game will never end. So they had to add this extra rule to make sure that there was some inevitability. Or people were still engaging with board states at the very least.
Right.
This was before, the infinites upon infinites upon infinites that can now rule that format.
Yeah.
In Flesh and Blood, we often see life gain tied to instants. This is something that's always been present in things like Sigil of Solace, but it's especially true now in Rosetta, where we have Count Your Blessings and Fertile Ground printed into the game. There have been action speed life gain cards like Healing Balm and Sunkiss, which both are basically the same. They cost 0, they gain you 3 life, they block for 2, but they don't have any go again. Why do you guys think it is that LSS has decided that cards with life gain don't have go again?
I don't know. I think it's because if they did, they would simply be a little bit too strong as the third or fourth card in a hand. A lot of the times we sort of talk about how decks need to work. Certain decks need to work a little bit to get action points and to properly utilize full 4-card, 5-card hands. If it's just a non-attack action card with go again, that's really easy for them to play and activate. There's not a big opportunity cost for them. If Healing Balm had go again and was a 3-block, I think that would be in every single Assassin deck, every single Guardian deck, every single Warrior deck.
No, I think it would be in every single Runeblade deck. Because it also...
Oh, yeah, it would just turn on Viscerai's ability.
Yeah.
He's gone now, but...
No, yeah. One thing I was thinking of when you were asking that, Fuzzy, is because you don't want to give Verdance a stronger combo. But these cards were printed way before Verdance is probably in the fold and was still around when Runeblades cared more about non-attack actions via Viscerai. Not really Chain so much, but also Briar.
I think they imagine that life gain is just a lot healthier if it's played in tandem with attacks. And that's not really what I'm trying to say. Let me rephrase it. I think if you played life gain card into life gain card into life gain card,
yes,
that would be unhealthy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Which is why it doesn't have go again. If you can still play it with other cards, like a go again attack into a go again attack into life gain, and that's a lot more healthy because at least they can interact with most of your turn. It's the uninteractability of life gain, which is why they have to put some control measures on it, right? Mm-hmm. They want you to be playing the game with the person across the table. And it's really easy to just sit there and ignore them in order to do your own thing and gain life. I think about Lorcana a little bit. There's interaction in Lorcana, but you build up your point total as opposed to taking down your opponent's life total.
Right.
And when Lorcana was introduced to me, this was phrased as a pro in the game, where it makes it more fun and casual as opposed to you feel like you're beating someone,
Right.
It is more approachable to a wider audience. And in Flesh and Blood, people who gain life are not considered to be nicer.
Yeah.
People don't actually look forward to sitting across the table and watching someone gain a bunch of life because they want you to play the game with them. They want something that they can interact with. If I throw 7 damage at you, I can block it. Or you can block it, right? But I can't block your life gain.
Yeah. I also want to point out, Fuzzy, you said that why is it that this action speed life gain doesn't have go again? Mm-hmm. It's also interesting because we never see those cards get played. They're not in any decks. No one's really running Healing Balm. Healing Potion is run, but more off of the delayed value that you can get from stacking that life gain up on cards that I'll be talking about later in the episode.
I think I actually disagree a little bit, Clark. I think now that Rosetta is here, people who want to play life gain decks have better options. But I definitely remember fatigue decks had their fatigue package. I've seen Talon do this, right? He played Fatigue Riptide and he would be okay, let's start with a bunch of Healing Bombs and Sun Kisses and defense cards and see what I can beat with a deck like this. And I've lost to decks like that when I'm playing aggro against Bravo, for example, people can just play Guardian. People did this in Blitz too, right? Yoji starts with 21 health, so they just run healing bombs and sun kisses and block 4s, and they see who they can beat with a strategy like that. So I don't think it's quite fair to say that they're not played. I think they're not played anymore because they're better strategies now.
Yeah. And the second point I was going to bring off of this, Fuzzy, is if the issue with Lifegain is that you can just play a bunch of it all at once, instant speed Lifegain lets you do that again.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like a design shift, right? Where Lifegain used to be only at action speed, but it has a little bit of block value, so you can run 100% cards that block, you know? You can be like, do I want my Lifegain or do I want to stop this on hit? Now it's a little bit more polarized because Count Your Blessings can't block on hits, so your opponent gets all the block hits that they want, but you have larger amounts of Lifegain. And as we've kind of seen, like the instant speed actually makes it harder to interact with it even still, because my on hits, like a Command and Conquer, can kill a healing bomb in your arsenal. It can't kill a Count Your Blessings in your arsenal, right?
Yep. True.
Or like Weakest Link.
Yeah, weakest Link can attack your CYB. I'm just going to play CYB in response.
And gain more life than you were threatening with Weakest Link anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. Since without the on hit, Weakest Link isn't going to do a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
So as we take a step back and think about Lifegain as a strategy in Flesh and Blood, I think it's good to think about what strengths and metas would Lifegain be good in, and what strengths and metas would Lifegain be bad in, because I think there should be an answer to both of those questions in order for us to consider Lifegain to be healthy for the game.
Yeah.
For example, one of its strengths would be a slower meta is not going to be prepared for a deck that can provide more defense than the offense you're providing. If I'm playing a deck that's very mid-rangey and I want to swing 7 and block 6 every turn, then I'm not going to be ready when my opponent blocks all 7 and then also gains life on top of it and isn't throwing damage back.
Yeah, that's a lot of compounding value that they're gaining, and you can't really beat with like the deck that you brought.
Yeah. I also really liked how Lifegain was expressing itself in this meta, in the hunted meta, right? Because like we had redline decks that had to find a way of dealing with rune blades, so they started running Lifegain. Arcane Polarity was making itself into a lot of sideboard lists.
Interesting.
We would also expect Lifegain to be worse in a very aggressive format where on hits are being thrown at you left and right. Aurora does this a little bit with like, she throws Snatch, right? She does.
Yeah.
And she has a...
Snatch is kind of the perfect example, right? She gives it go again, swings for forward, you go, oh no, I have 2 Count Your Blessings and a Sigil of Solace in hand. I can't stop this.
Guess you're drawn, bud.
Or when they drop a Channel Lightning Valley, and if you have any instance in your hand, how are you supposed to block out Channel Lightning Valley? Syndra does this maybe a little bit less so, but just having Lifegain is not enough to get around these on hits. You're going to be allowing the aggro player to run over you and do whatever they want. So because I was able to name a deck for strengths and weaknesses, that is one sign that Lifegain might maybe be at a healthy place in Flesh and Blood. I think it's also kind of funny how I mentioned mid-range strategies, because it's very rare that we actually have a very mid-range meta.
Yeah, our last one was the heavy hitters meta before we got the big refresh of Lifegain in Rosetta.
The Golden Age.
We would also hope that when Lifegain shows up in the game, that it's not very pure defensive, that you're not able to play a game just centered around fatiguing players out and gaining life. I mean, maybe you might disagree with that point, dear listener. You might be a fatigue player that feels unnecessarily called out. But I think like if it's very rampant that there's lots of decks that are just blocking and not attacking, some people might not be a fan of that game. They might not find it very interesting.
I think that would... I think if you looked at other TCGs, and if that was a dominant strategy in those TCGs, people would be talking about not picking that game up. I guess that's a roundabout way of saying, yeah, I think it's generally unpopular for pure Lifegain defensive strategies to be dominant.
Definitely.
And how would we know if Lifegain is a bad design? I'm going to offer up 2 extremes. First of all, if Lifegain isn't present in the game at all, then it would be a failure of a design because it's not being played, right?
Right.
You can compare it to maybe like Guardian Auras. Guardian Auras have not been hitting the mark for cards that are actually played in Flesh and Blood, and we don't really think of them as necessarily super good design, at least right now. That maybe that opinion could change if we see the right like Guardian hero or something.
Yeah,
True.
Sigil of Solace is just better than half of the cards that have gain life on them.
Yeah.
And Sigil of Solace even only sees play in some like specific decks that really want the life gain, right?
Yeah.
On the other hand, if life gain is really prevalent and every deck feels like it has to run life gain, or there's a deck that can run just life gain to the point where the opponent doesn't feel like they can deal any damage, that would be at an unhealthy spot in the meta.
Yeah, or like if any damage that they deal just doesn't do anything. Like, what's the point of throwing this attack? If that is the feeling that the other player is having on the other side of the table, turn after turn, that's probably not healthy.
Yeah.
So with those being some very broad generalizations as to what a healthy or unhealthy game could look like with life gain in it, I'm going to hand things off to Joel, who's going to talk more specifically about what Flesh and Blood and life gain look like right now in practice.
That's me. So this pitch is called Joel Engie, and I think one of our hosts is overplaying how upset I am with life gain at the moment, but that's fine. I like the title. It's fine. But I do think life gain as it stands is broken in Flesh and Blood, but I mostly think that because of the sources of life gain that exist and the lack of counters to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And I will say, I think since CYB has been nerfed and its continued prevalence, but like not dominance the same way that it did when there was blue copies of this card, is changing my perspective about life gain, because I think the aggressive meta that we're in has like a built-in counter, but I'll talk about more later on. The number one reason why I think life gain in Flesh and Blood is so powerful is because decks have a finite amount of damage that they can deal, especially if your hero plays in a way where you need to play cards in combination with each other to have like explosive amounts of damage, like Runeblade, or at least when Viceroy will like chain together non-attack actions and attack actions together to have one explosive turn, or Rangers who buff their singular arrow with a bunch of non-attacks. They can burn through cards really quickly, and if you gain more life than they're able to threaten, then it gets to that point of like you said, Clark, where it doesn't feel like you're able to do anything and you're just basically playing solitaire against someone who's just gaining a shit ton of life. The caveat here is obviously weapons exist in Flesh and Blood. There's always that pitch outlet for decks that have weapons that just, can chip away at your opponent over the course of the game. And that's a really good way to reduce the life gap when someone's just all they're doing is blocking and gaining life. However, a lot of the decks that abuse life gain have big ass weapons like Decimated Great Axe or Titan's Fist or Anothos or something like that. Like, these weapons kind of mitigate how much you're able to combat these life gaining decks by having bigger and badder hammers.
I just want to go back to a point that you mentioned, Joel, and that's that Flesh and Blood is unique because decks have a finite amount of damage they can deal. I know you mentioned it. I just wanted to really focus in on that. Mm-hmm. Any game with a board state like Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering, they all have creatures that can attack, and you get infinite value out of any one card.
True.
You don't usually think of it that way because you're not actually getting infinite value. Right. But in Flesh and Blood, you play a card, it's gone out of your deck forever. It gives you a finite amount of hit here. Mm-hmm. And these weapons are a way for your deck to keep dealing continual damage. The more you swing with your weapon, the more that finite number goes up, quote unquote.
Right.
But life gain is good on the premise that my opponent is not going to be throwing damage forever, and I just need to survive until they're done.
Yeah.
Right.
If you think of it almost like a very basic math calculation of like, if I add up all the numbers in the bottom left of my opponent's deck and then all the numbers in the bottom right in my deck, plus my life total, plus my gain life, if the numbers that I have in my defensive value is larger than the numbers that my opponent can have, then I will always win the game.
Yep.
It's deterministic.
Mm-hmm. And like you were saying, Joel, it's those big weapons that help you push the tide. You might think that like you have to worry about your opponent's life total too, but no, you only worry about your own life total, your own blocking capability, and then once they're all petered out, then you've presumptively won.
Mm-hmm. And then on the other side of the table, we need to find a way of getting as much of that repeatable value out of our weapon as conceivably possible to make our number go over their deterministic number.
Right. And I think those are two really good distinctions, so thank you both for bringing that up. However, Now we enter Exhibit B, the World Finals of 2024, where the Enigma player was playing CYB with all 9 copies versus, I think it was Aurora, right?
Mercy Bickle's Aurora.
Yes, thank you. And the reason why this example comes up in my mind, and I understand that blue CYB is no longer an issue, but this is like one of the most controversial moments of Flesh and Blood as of late in terms of like the mechanical parts of Flesh and Blood and less about the social stuff. Because Aurora's weapon swings for 1 as a base, 2 if you played a lightning card. So this weapon is pretty weak, a 1-for-1 value, unless you're able to play another card. But that also means if your opponent has full deck knowledge or full knowledge of your list and can count how many threats you have and how many lightning cards you have specifically, they're going to run out of those. And then it gets to a point where you're only swinging your weapon for 1 and maybe like generating a rune chant with your Grasp of the Arknight, but that's all you got in terms of like the repeatable resources that you have to chip away at this life deficit. But the Enigma player has their hero ability where you, on each turn, if you pitch a chi, you can generate a point of defense and I think 2 points of offense if you swing with it. And you have like access to arcane barriers. So really, as soon as that person got paired into Aurora, it was kind of like a done deal, because like you said, Clark, the numbers on my bottom right outweigh the numbers on my opponent's bottom left, plus the life gain, plus my starting health total, plus the virtual amount of life that you're gaining through prevention effects. So this is like the amalgamation of all the things that I do not like about life gain, because it gets to a point where the weapon, so to speak, or like the repeatable resource you have outvalues your opponents in a late game where there's no cards left in deck. It's just you have to deal with the rest of my life gain, and you don't have any cards left in deck to deal with it.
Yeah. I wrote an article about that specific moment and my thoughts on life gain not long after it. Please go read the article on the Wraith Times.
Link in the description, probably.
Probably. And in that one, I noted how Enigma was specifically designed and well positioned to make the best use out of the life gain that CYB afforded. So CYB wasn't like the only reason that they won there, because it was Enigma's hero ability generating offense and defense at the same time that really let Gregor Kowalski round the corner and start taking over the game again.
Yeah, and I remember this sparking a really long drawn out conversation about like why fatigue and life gain game plans are so strong. And I think, Clark, you and I were sort of talking afterwards, and I mentioned one of my opinions, which is fatigue decks win during deck construction and not during the actual gameplay, because it's the element of surprise when you sit down across from your opponent and you expect them to be this like mid-range gameplay or even aggressive gameplay, and they completely flip the tables on you and bring every defensive card they can muster in their class, all the D-reacts, all the life gain that they can. And now, if you don't pick up on it early enough, you're already at a disadvantage as a aggro player trying to fight an uphill battle.
I think this is most visible when you play against Dorinthia, who has like the classic Dawnblade plan, but also like a really nice Hatchets mid-range plan, either of which are like kind of viable, and you could maybe see it in Armory, but also the Decimator Great Axe plan, and she could be running CYB as much as she wants, you know, and you never really know what you're playing against until they actually like start playing cards from their deck, because just revealing the hero isn't enough.
Yeah. Fatigue also just comes in with a much longer perspective on the game than I think other strategies do.
Yes.
And if you don't adapt quickly, then you will easily find yourself going, oh, I didn't get enough value out of that one card that I already played.
Right. Yeah, if you're not planning for your third and fourth cycle like fatigue decks are, you already lose. And life gain is a big portion of that, because not only do you have to abuse the defensive overlap that you have access to, like with D-Reacts in the arsenal, or like Brothers in Arms being able to use a tunic counter to turn into a block 4. It can really seem like fatigue is the problem, but I think fatigue has always been around and abusable, but I think the life gain portion is like one of the symptoms of like these decks popping up.
I think because at the end of the day, the defensive overlap that it can provide, like Fuzzy mentioned, the way that it gets around chip damage and other evasive forms of damage, it can invalidate a lot of the value that decks have to feel like they spec into. Fatigue decks don't need to spec for aggro. They're already spec'd to beat aggro as a strategy. Nor do they really need to spec to beat mid-range. They're already designed to beat mid-range as a strategy. Nor do they need to... I mean, they do need to spec for fatigue mirrors. But I feel like there's such a small amount of the metagame that when the fatigue player sits down, they don't really need to worry about what you're playing.
Yeah.
But I think also in saying that, Talon would disagree with me. Like our resident fatigue player, Talon and Trent would both sit down and say, no, I have to make very major changes both to the way I play and the cards I include in my list if I want to beat certain decks.
I actually think those are two really good examples for different reasons that I brought up already, because the decks that both Trent and Talon like to play fatigue on, no one in their right mind would think maybe Arachne Huntsman, but like Riptide is probably the last person I would expect to be a fatigue deck, and because of people like Talon, it's like more normalized, I guess. But like I don't think that was like on anybody's radar really when they first looked at Riptide.
I don't know. He plays defense reactions. You know, it's right there on the card. Play defense reactions
And gets the extra value from them.
Yeah, I think it's more of like this disruptive mid-range. You know, if you have access to a lot of D-Reacts, you might as well just go fatigue. Maybe it's more so the intent of LSS that I have in mind. Like, I don't think any of them wanted to create a fatigue hero through Riptide.
Perhaps another way of arguing your point here, Joel, is that Arachne Huntsman, Trent's deck, and Riptide, Talon's deck, are not the fatigue decks that are winning events.
Right.
And so...
No offense.
Zero offense to them. They're incredible players, and they do incredibly well at our locals. They aren't brutalizing metas and taking down RTNs. Not really. Which I think leads into your next point.
Yeah, and I think what really strengthens my argument the best is like the decks that are already strong abuse life gain for basically no opportunity cost. And here I'm thinking about obviously Enigma because she used it to great effect during the World Finals, but also New. New was also in that same Worlds tournament with CYB.
Same top 8.
Same top 8, and she still continues to be prevalent, not only because gaining life is really good, especially when you can do it like at instant speed, but New has the best disruption in the game. Her Mask of Recurring Nightmares, obviously when you're transcending with these blue cards, and also she still has access to like Surgical Extraction and Codex of like just a lot of really good core cards. And when you have a hero like this, you can easily slot in 6 cards to just blow out people who only expect to end a game in the first or second cycle. They're not thinking about the third or fourth cycle like you mentioned, Clark.
The opportunity cost for adding life gain is also really, really low when the best life gain right now is generic.
Right.
It's Sigil of Solace and Count Your Blessings. Any deck at the bottom of the meta that can even remotely go to a late game fatigue scenario can and probably will run these cards, and through element of surprise or having the right meta can easily make it to a top 8 of an RTN through solid play. But
sure,
it feels odd that what they needed to get there was so low. It was these generic commons and rares.
Right.
And you can slap that into any bottom of the tier list deck.
Yeah, every hero has 9 like commons and rares that they don't want to play but have to. So just take them out for extra life gain. You'll probably get more out of it.
Yeah. I mean, looking back to the article that I wrote, I called on LSS's main design principles that they want to do moving forward. Class and talent identity was chief among them, and CYB and Sigil of Solace just being this 9 card to 12 card, just let me dump this in my bottom tier deck, completely invalidates that.
Absolutely.
It is a little fishy that the life gain that exists in the game is almost exclusively generic. Like there's Fertile Ground, like Earth heroes, I guess, have been able to play around a little bit with the life gain.
Yeah, they have a lot more life gain inherently built in.
But they seem almost afraid to have a class centered around life gain or a hero centered around life gain. So they just stick to putting it in generic cards, and now anyone can run it.
Yeah.
And they have enough tools now in the game that it's reached a critical mass, and you can sit across from any hero and watch them play CYB against you and start like sweating as you got to figure out what am I doing in second, third, fourth cycle now.
And I mean, talking about some of these surprises that have happened recently, we had a Fang CYB do pretty solidly at some SoCal armories.
He made top 8 with CYB Decimator Fang.
And then I think Aggro Blaze, another FaB content creator, took a CYB Betsy to a top 4 finish.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Also, I think Bwippy in our Discord channel mentioned some Australian local taking CYB Betsy to some top 8s as well.
Yeah, I think 2 top 8s with CYB Rampart Betsy.
Yeah.
So
all you need is one good reason in your class or talent. Warrior has Decimator, Guardian has Rampart. And like, what else do you need? You know,
right.
The core is already so strong.
And the reason why I think this is such a big issue with Flesh and Blood, even though it's not like the top of the meta, like destroying every armory, every RTN, there's not enough Lifegain hate cards yet. There's only Poison the Well and Reaping Blade, I think, and maybe like the Scythe. Was it Soul Reaper?
Dread
Scythe, that's the one. So I want to talk a little bit about like some ideas that I have for Lifegain hate cards. The first of them being potions. What I like about incorporating more potions as life gain hate is you can easily slot it in just like you can slot in life gain into any deck, and you can just sort of have it like sit on the board and like as an instant if you're a hero or if your opponent would gain life, they get that much or that much -1, or they lose that much. I don't know.
That was a hot take. I don't think you presented it like one, but the idea that like items are really easy to slot into a deck, I think is a little bit radical.
Well, I actually really like this. Maybe instead of potions, talismans.
Yeah.
Too, right? Because at least talismans have go again in the way that a lot of the talismans have been designed. But this idea of I can put my hate on the board and then say, all right, life gain player, can you get me to use this at a bad time?
Yeah.
Right.
I totally agree with that. Like having something that sits on the board that's not equipment, you know?
Yeah, it could also let me do it in response to a source of life gain, right?
Right.
But even then, Poison the Well has a similar issue of like, I played it in response to your life gain. Well, guess what? I have a second life gain to play on top of it.
Yeah.
But maybe if we put more of those in a deck, it could be okay. Like, I see that you have countered my counter, but I have countered your counter to my counter.
Yeah, I just think there's so much flexibility with the life gain aspect of it. I think there should be like very, very rigid hate against life gain cards as well.
Being instant speed makes it so much fucking harder.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little ridiculous. The other idea I had was like equipment. I think Reaping Blade is a really interesting like game changer for CYB decks.
Reaping Blade only works when I, the aggressive aggro player, have less life than you, the defensive fatigue player. It's not really gonna come up all that often where my Reaping Blade is taking away value. Viserai and Florian are able to leverage it a little bit more because they can pivot to more of a rune chant stacking build or build in a more rune chant stacking build where it's like, yes, I am fine going 10 life points below you because I can then deal 30 points of arcane damage in a big giant burst. But then the life gain player goes, okay, I'm just going to wait till I have exactly your life total and then play my life gain.
Yeah.
If anything, also with specifically CYB, they're still incentivized to play it for no value because you're already burning a bunch of cards, like waiting for the life gain player to do things.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, and that's why I think there should be another iteration of equipment that deals with life gain, because the options that we have in the equipment slot are so niche, and one of the most popular users of Reaping Blade just LL. So there's already like less options that we have now than we did like a week ago.
I think you have to be really careful with hate cards that they are too niche. I think like people don't play a whole lot of Poison the Well right now, even though like you can pair up against life gain at any time. And I think like that's how you know it's not going to be a very helpful hate card, is if it's not giving you more ways to play it than hating on that one specific strategy, you know? Like Null Rune Gloves is not a good card, but we run it because we have to, right?
Yeah.
And my game plan gets significantly worse because I'm running Null Rune Gloves. It's an equipment that doesn't do anything except help me block Arcane Barrier, you know? If I wanted a hate card to be effective, I would need to put it in my deck list. In order to put it into my deck list, I need to imagine at least maybe multiple games in the tournament where it's going to be helpful.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to necessarily like win me the game when I play that card, but as long as it's not screwing over the rest of my game plan, then it's an effective hate card.
It needs to do something else, right? The best AB in your arm slot isn't Null Rune Gloves, it's Bullseye Bracer.
Right, because it's in your game plan, right? It's adjacent to your game plan at the very least.
Yeah. So I think additional text where it says like if your opponent would gain like maybe on like a generic piece similar to like Crown of Providence makes all CNCs worse, Balance of Justice makes all Art of Wars worse. A generic piece that is generically good, and then it also makes Lifegain worse.
Yeah.
I am slightly worried, though, of that just becoming another Kano situation where it's like, well, guess everyone's forgotten about CYB. Time to break it out. Put
Yeah.
in all my decks again.
Yeah, and you know when you add more answers to Lifegain, you kind of invite more powerful Lifegain effects to be created. So it's a difficult thing to balance, and I'm glad I'm not the one that has to do it, to be honest. It's something that I've been vocal about, and I think, you know, eventually when they do print more, I hope that it's like really, really versatile and stuff that you like actually run, and not another situation of like poison the well.
Yeah.
But I think I've yapped enough, and I'm actually looking forward to what Lifegain could look like in the future, and I think Clark would be the perfect person to talk about it right now.
Yes. Moving on to Blue Pitch and the future of Lifegain, which is really just Clark's opportunity to talk about different design ideas that I think they could use to incorporate life and life as a resource. Because honestly, the future of Lifegain, I think, is pretty dull and uninteresting. I don't think they should print a lot more Lifegain, and I think they should try to minimize its impact in the game altogether. I do not like gaining life as a player. As a dev, or as someone who likes to play dev on my podcast,
That's a good line.
I also don't really like life gain. It prolongs the game, and unless it is incorporated in some proactive element, I don't think it has much of a place. It can exist, it shouldn't be a lot. So the first thing I want to do is really take a look at what LSS has been doing, because I think they've been really inconsistent with life gain. Fuzzy already mentioned in Red Pitch how it was all action speed, or like only over 2 turns, right? You had to like play an item and then activate the item. Or it just, none of them ever had go again, and now all of a sudden all the life gain is instant speed and really hard to interact with. So there's that inconsistency, but then there's also just an inconsistency with rates and synergies. Fertile Ground is conditionally on rate. Looking at Sigil of Solace as our baseline, a 0 cost instant gain 3, Fertile Ground is a 2 cost gain 5 if you have 4 or more Earth cards in your Banish Zone. So you need to decompose at least twice before Fertile Ground becomes an on-rate card?
You know, with Earth, Ice, and Lightning talents, I think it's also helpful to remember that just having the Earth tag makes them really good, you know?
Yeah, still adds value to the card.
Sigil of Solace is not going to turn on my Decompose effects, you know? Fertile Ground will. So
Yeah.
that makes it, like...
Even a little bit better.
Yeah.
Sure, so even when I say on rate, there's a little bit of extra value in there, because it says Earth at the bottom.
It's Earth rate.
Yeah, it's Earth rate. But then there's CYB, which is wildly overrate and self-synergizes. Now, I know that multiple people have evaluated CYB in multiple different ways.
You're telling me that CYB is strong?
I have gotten into arguments with multiple people on the internet about the way that we evaluate CYB. Here is my base evaluation of it, which is looking at how the rate of the individual card played, which is that CYB is under rate for the first cast, is under rate for the second cast, is on rate for the third cast, and then is over rate for the 4th, 5th, 6th, and if blues are available, 7th, 8th, and 9th. It is overrate for the vast majority of times you play the card. And if you noted there, that's 2 underrate and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times overrate. It is 3 times more likely to be overrate than underrate in a game of Flesh and Blood.
I guess I never really thought about it like that.
No, nobody does. And it frustrates me so much. Because that's why CYB creates so much life gain and so much defensive overlap and is so easy to slot into decks. Because it doesn't just go a little overrate like some Majestics do. It goes really overrate.
Yeah.
When you're using 2 cards to gain, what's the max amount of life? 3 plus 8? 11? You can use 2 cards to gain 11 life conceivably.
Yeah.
That is wildly overrate. Yes, you have to do a lot to get there. I understand. It's a big quest. It takes the whole game.
Yeah, and it's also, even though we can't play all 9 copies right now in CC, James White has stated that eventually he's gonna unban the blue one. So it's worth thinking about, like, what will the design look like when we get there? What would it take for a design like this to become fair?
Yes. Now, also with this, in Rosetta, they printed 2 Majestics for our Earth heroes that get double the value of the life you have gained. It either makes rune chance equal to the amount of life you gained, or it amps equal to the amount of life you gained. This is Rampant Growth life and Thistlebloom life. These are cards that, by design, ask you to find the way to gain the most amount of life in a single instance. Now, one thing that I do like about Thistlebloom Life specifically is that it's an action to get that double value. So you have to play your instant speed stuff at action speed, which then makes it interactable. Weakest link actually matters. CNC actually matters. I'm so happy that these cards actually fucking matter when the payoff cards are actions.
Yeah.
Because it makes me want to play the life gain at action speed. It makes me want to play it on my turn. And that makes it way more interactable and way healthier. But you can see how these 4 different designs that came out in Rosetta aren't exactly jiving with each other. They're all interacting on wildly different nexuses and played in wildly different ways. Another thing that I think we could look at is Levia Blasmafet Consumed, which I know is a weird card to put in here. Like, we're talking about life totals, Clark. How did you manage to bring up Levia in this conversation?
That's our skill, baby.
I'm used to it by now. Just go on, keep going.
These new users don't even remember the beginning of the podcast where Clark
God,
had only played Levia seriously. It was just like, so here's how Levia is influenced by...
If you're new to the pod, it's actually just a Levia/Bolton podcast. That's the joke /
We've actually grown a lot from that stigma. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, you've now expanded to all other warriors.
I'll shut up now.
Levia Blasmafet Consumed cares about you staying above a certain life total and having to plan your equipment block around that life total so that you can find the space to transform into this super powerful version and get this extra proactive effect. I really, really like that design, and I think it would be interesting if we saw similar threshold-based designs that played off of this. Maybe something like Death's Door, which would only give you an effect if you are below 10 life.
And this is a mechanic you're spitballing, right? You're making up on the spot.
Yes, I definitely did not write this down in the notes.
You're not referencing an existing card.
No, I'm not. So this mechanical idea would encourage you to play around a specific life threshold to gain this additional benefit.
I really like this idea. The idea that as a life gain player or a fatigue player, that my game gets a lot more interesting when I go really low in my life total. I think to make it a more interesting number, I would put it at like 5 life. I think 5 is when it actually gets interesting because that's actually like any attack can be lethal, you know?
Yeah.
Like there are definitely decks where like if you're at 10, you're at lethal range, but a fatigue player is probably not worried about being at 10. They're like, okay, I've got a lot of fight left in me. Let's go. But at 5 life, it starts to get real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At 5 life, the aggro player has hope.
Well, maybe it could even be in a middle life total, right? Maybe it's like if you're between 10 and 15 life.
Yeah, it could even be like indirect life gain, where instead of gaining life, you return to a threshold you were the previous turn. So, sort of like a like Tree of Perdition from Magic the Gathering, where you trade life points or something.
That's great, but I already hate that card
okay.
for completely unrelated reasons we will not get into.
Yeah,
right
whoever
now.
said that, fuck you.
Let's just say that all my friends are dead to me whenever I think about that card.
We were kind of assholes that day a little bit.
Oh my god.
We were 19, it's fine. Bygones are bygones. As long as I just don't hear about Tree of fucking Perdition, I'm not reminded of Talon backstabbing me. Like the little rat he was.
I'm definitely asking about this later.
I also think that incremental life gain as a reward for your proactive strategy that you're already trying to do is very fine. For example, 0 for 3 stealth attacks are kind of lame. But if I gain a life when they banish something, they're a lot less lame. And I like this strategy. I actually like a lot of news, common and rare 0 for 3 banish a card. If I banish a specific type of card, I gain a life.
It's kind of a nice design pattern because like a 0 for 4 is hard to block. A 0 for 3 that gains me a life when it hits is still just 4 points, but it's easier to block, you know? It has a little bit more counterplay to it.
Yeah, and then I get to play all the stealth card synergies, which are way better than the contract card synergies.
Yeah, the designer's allowed to layer on more value onto the card in other ways because they've created a 4 value card that is easier to block.
Yeah, it reminds me of my Necromancer design all the way back in episode 19.
Damn.
Where I had a 0 for 3 attack that scaled color-wise, not with its power, but with how much life it gained when it hit. It was a 0 for 3 that could gain 3 life at red, 2 life at yellow, and 1 life at blue.
Yeah.
So, incremental life gain for already playing into a strategy feels fine to me. Because life gain isn't the goal, it's an incremental benefit.
Right.
And it encourages interaction between the players.
Yeah, and for similar reasons, and I'm going to cash in my Joel chip because I'm going to bring up Bolton. Luminous Ascension is not broken, or people don't call it broken because of the life gain for each card you put in Soul.
Yeah.
That's just like a benefit you get to it. Like there's other larger things at play when you play this card, and that's just like the incremental life gain that just makes it a little bit sweeter for Bolton.
Yeah, it makes it a little bit sweeter, helps the math out a little bit more, lets you take damage to play the cool proactive card.
Right.
Those are things that I'm ultimately fine with, and I think is a better space for life gain. I don't want to see cards that are gaining 10 life, 12 life, double digits, big numbers.
Yeah.
And like playing into these Earth Majestics, I much rather they just let that die.
Yeah.
And instead focus on smaller incremental amounts of life gain. It's kind of like arcane damage, right? You need to be careful about printing things that say deal 5 or 6 arcane damage.
Yeah.
And you can be a lot less restrained with things that deal 1 arcane damage.
Big numby, not always better.
If anything, it makes it way harder to design around.
Big numby bad.
Big numby bad. The one place I think that larger amounts of life gain can work is if it is paired with strategies that make you pay life to do things. If there are attacks that make me have to pay life to cast them, then I should have larger amounts of life gain to let me play those things. Almost like the Sigil of Solace is acting like the blue that fuels me playing the card.
Oh.
I can gain the life to then pay the life and cast something.
Does sound pretty badass.
Yes. Do we think that would be healthy for the game?
Maybe.
With the way that LSS has been pumping out these like newer modern Flesh and Blood heroes, I think it could be balanced if there's a deep enough quest to get this like using life as a resource effect, because we've seen how powerful it can be in other games like Magic the Gathering.
Oh, yeah.
You only need 1 life to win, and you will go to 1 just to like, you know,
Free cast everything.
yeah, exactly. So I think you need to really be careful because life points are the most important resource in Flesh and Blood. And playing with that, I think there needs to be a pretty significant cost to be able to have that effect.
I don't know. We kind of already see life as a resource in the Shadow talent. Like, Leviat, Chain, and Vincent all give you the opportunity to take extra damage in order to see higher ceilings. Vincent can just sit there on like 2 Blood Debt Runegate cards and have, in a future turn, like a 7 or 8 card hand, and it can be really good. That's kind of what we're talking about, right? Is taking life in order to have more damage come through.
Yeah, and I actually think like Shadow is one of the most powerful talents for that reason, because Chain obviously was very strong because he hit. I mean, obviously this is like early LSS design. I'm not going to like beat that dead horse anymore, but him being able to stack up a bunch of attacks in Blood Dead that were all like 0 for 3, 0 for 4, some of them with Go Again, was inherently powerful. And I think Clark and I have talked to great extent how when Levia rolls really well, she can be one of the most broken heroes in the game with multiple 1-costed 6 power attacks, extra action points with Scabskin Leathers, although that's not directly Shadow, but there's these things that like compounded value, and that's why she feels incomplete a lot of the times, because she has access to so much tools. And Vincent feels hamstrung in a way because of Runegate, preventing her from playing multiple cards without very precise planning ahead of time and using your life as a resource to store those 2 Blood Debt cards, in Banish.
Mm-hmm. I think with all that being said, I think it is time for us to move on to our Arsenal Zone.
Our what?
It's the part of the podcast where we all talk about a card that we've been thinking about lately for whatever reason we want.
That one.
And we like to start off our Arsenal Zone by shouting out a Patreon member. Yeah, so we didn't plug the Patreon at the beginning of the episode, so I guess we're going to do it here. We have a Patreon where at the $5 or $10 tier, you have the ability to send in card suggestions. We take a look at everyone who sent in a suggestion, and then we roll a dice, and we randomly select one person's card to get shout out here in the Arsenal Zone. And for today, that lucky subscriber is...
Dice roll noise.
Moving!
I've actually met this guy twice now, in person, in the flesh and blood.
He's pretty wacky. Cool.
Yeah, we're a big fan of Mulvane over here. He actually came down to an armory of ours and fucking decimated me with Riptide. Thanks for that, by the way.
Bro, he's so good with it.
And he shouted out Death Dealer this week. He says, this card is insane, especially after the book bannings. 1 resource to draw a card? Yeah, you spend a card on the load, but then it just replaces itself. Pretty crazy weapon. I guess it's to make up for the fact that the Ranger class doesn't have a weapon that deals damage itself. And I think he said something else. No, that was it.
Yeah, this is a juicy little card to talk about.
Yeah, I'm surprised we actually haven't talked about this card before.
And then Gino Jack actually responded to that suggestion. Gino Jack says, especially if there's a footnote for snapshot interactions or the looming threat of tri-shot.
Oh, dude, yeah. Snapshot with this card.
Yeah, jumping into discussing Death Dealer, I agree, Mulvane, the card's pretty insane.
Yeah.
Because it can even a lot of the times be a free card if you pitch a resource card into it. If a lot of people have talked about how gold is the payoff for warriors, because you can turn that blue into like a floating resource and a red. And Rangers have just always been able to do that with Death Dealer.
Yeah.
They've just always been able to be like, pitch a yellow, load a card, I have 1 floating and a new red in hand.
And because their cards are so cheap already, like a lot of their pumps cost 0, their arrows cost what, like maybe 1 resource? So like lately, like Azalea players have been like ditching all of their blues except for Knock the Death Whistle and just playing like a very yellow line list. I pitch a yellow into Death Dealer, I use my resource for my arrow, and I get the extra card that's just going to be a red that I can pump.
Yeah, that's actually been a trend in Azalea for a long time. One of my really good friends that actually got me started in Flesh and Blood, Mitch.
Hey, they got us in Flesh and
Blood
too.
all of us, really. Mitch from Finch, he always told me, like, you really don't need yellows as this character. You really don't need blues as this character. Yellows pay for everything. The weapon itself and the arrow. And now that she has, like, this really good critical mass of 1-costed arrows, and all the buffs are still really strong and 0-costed. It just allows you to run like the best cards in your deck. You don't really need to concern yourself with blues or even blue arrows. It's just all gas, no breaks.
Mulvane, thank you so much for your patronage and for sending in Death Dealer for us to talk about. I don't think we've ever really spent that much time talking about the Ranger class outside of Riptide because Talon is kind of our main Ranger guy, and he's all about Riptide. So it's wonderful to get the chance to expand our purview and talk about these cards that we don't get to interact with a lot, right? And I'm sure that many of you out there have your own cards like Death Dealer, where you're like, this is one of the cards that shape the way I think about Flesh and Blood right now.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about it because we aren't around it in the same way that you are. So
Yeah.
if you decide to join our Patreon, please tell us about these cards so that we can get those ideas on this section and we can talk about them.
Yeah. So now each of us are going to shout out a card. Who wants to go first? Let's hear from RTN winner Joel Recinos.
Ooh.
So I have a card today that I didn't use at all during that day where I won the RTN.
Wow.
Wow.
And that is Cosmic Awakening. I've had a tough relationship with Cosmic Awakening recently because there were several matches in very important matchups where all I needed was to find my second copy of Cosmic Awakening that I can play for 15 or 20 or whatever, because I have so much chi left in my deck. The deck's grinding to a close and I need to end it before I get ended, right? And leading up to this RTN that I won, I only had 2 copies because I was following like this deck list on YouTube of a YouTuber that I really like, Aurora from Flesh and Blood. I don't know if you guys have watched him at all. I think they were like a little bit down on Cosmic Awakening because the meta is so aggressive. But me, I was like, my meta has a lot of slow decks. We have like Enigma diehards, we have like Guardian diehards, we have people that just want to shove CYB and Decimated Great Axe into decks. So I was like, I need that third copy of Cosmic Awakening. And then during the RTN, I had multiple opportunities to play it for like 10 or 15. And even though I love slamming this card for 10 and 15, it just wasn't the right move. And overall, I liked it as a blue 3 block. And it was funny because in my finals game, I was really hoping to close out the game versus Tautau with Cosmic Awakening. But
one time I cast this card all tournament was to win the tournament.
That would have been fucking dope. But instead, I lost a copy to Ancestral Harmony. I lost a copy to one of his banished effects, and I had to block with a third one. So even though I didn't get to use it like basically all day, it's probably one of my favorite cards of the Mystic Talent because it sort of means you can't fatigue any of these heroes, and I like aggressive decks that have this mid-rangey gameplay, which is what Zen really encompassed. Well, it's not like he's gone. He still does that. I expected him to LL already. But it's one of my favorite parts because you can be aggressive, you can be mid-rangey, and then randomly at the end of the game you can send something for 15 with inherently bad cards, especially if you're running low on combo cards. So yeah, that's the card I wanted to shout out because I placed a lot of importance and included a third copy and took out probably some other cards that I could have really used and didn't get to use it at all. So I thought that was really funny.
Clarky, do you want to go next?
I'll be nice and quick with my card. I'm talking about Arc Lightning. It is a yellow 0-cost 2-block card that is Lightning Runeblade. It's an Aurora specialization and says, whenever Go Again resolves, deal 1 arcane damage. It also gives your next action card that you play Go Again, and it has Go Again itself. This card can very, very easily get 3 value on a turn. Extremely easily get 3 value on a turn. And that's already better than a yellow head jab. Like, even at its floor, it is incredibly good, right?
Yeah,
It's only bad as a 1-card play. Oh no. Like, it's bad as a 1-card play. Oh, I'm so scared. Like, even if it's this and a blue, that's still Arc Lightning, Pitch to Grasp, Swing Sword.
Yeah.
That's still 1, 2, 3 sources of arcane damage.
And then the sword for 2.
And then the sword for 2.
So it's a 2-card 5.
With the rune chant that you made, it's a 2-card 6.
Okay.
Off of a yellow and a blue.
Oh, yeah.
Like, its floor is still incredibly high. And I've heard people say, like, actually, this card, like, isn't even that good. It's not incredible to, like, build your entire deck around it and then try to, like, make the Flicker Wisp combo happen. But also, you can just do that with this card. You can just, like, play 3 Crazy Brews and Healing Pots and Potions of Strength so that you just go Flicker Wisp, Fuse, Arc Lightning, and then you just activate 10 sources of Go Again to destroy your opponent.
Because the activated ability has Go Again.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
All the activated abilities of potions and gold tokens and equipment and weapons now just have 1 extra value plastered onto them.
Yeah.
This card can easily reach the 6 arcane damage that I would have to set up multiple interactable Malefics on my board with and hit like a rune chant generator in my hand on the same turn. Like a Revel or a Deadwood Dirge for my Mordred Tide. But Mordred Tide was a red card, and this is a yellow. Arc Lightning is really fucking strong, and if Aurora becomes the best deck in format like these last little RTN results may imply they are, I think this could become the next card in the crosshairs for a ban.
Interesting.
What about you, Fuzzy? You've been pretty quiet over there.
Yeah, so I haven't been playing a whole lot of Flesh and Blood lately. I've still been kind of enjoying my little break off. The closest I've come to building a deck just to like jam on Talishar was when I was like, I don't even know why I was looking through. I think I was editing our episode where we talked about delayed value, and I was looking at all the Guardian auras because we were talking about Guardian auras, and I saw one that I always like wish was playable, and that's Embolden.
Oh.
I teased my hosts earlier. I told them that this was draft chaff that I don't really talk about a lot, but it's always been one of my favorite cards. Embolden is a 4-cost Guardian action aura with Go Again. And when it enters the arena, if you control another non-token aura, you draw a card. And at the beginning of your action phase, you destroy Embolden, and then the next Guardian attack action card that you play this turn gains +5 power.
Damn.
And this aura blocks for 3.
Sheesh.
So without the drawing a card, you're paying 4 for the aura with Go Again to give +5 to your next attack. That's a lot of tempo you're giving up to play this card just to get +5, which isn't the worst thing in the world, especially when you pair it with some really cool Guardian cards. Like all the Crush effects have these really nice on-hits, or maybe like Thump, which was from the same set, Tales of Aria.
Oh, we thumping.
Where you can like give the Thump Dominate and discard a card on hit just because you pumped the Thump. You'd be a Thump Pumper.
What a great little turn of phrase.
So naturally, like, say you're like pouring for your chaff, right? You see Embolden. You're like, okay, so what Guardian auras can I play in order to get the card draw off of Embolden? And if you're looking through the Guardian pool, there's like some Go Again auras, you know, but there's not a whole lot of them. The big ones, I think, are actually in the talented pool. If you're an Oldham player or a new Jarl player, there are some really good auras that are already being played by Guardian now, such as Channel Lake Frigid.
Yeah, that fits on the cost curve.
Channel Lake Frigid costs 2 and this costs 4. So you could pitch 2 blues to play Channel Lake Frigid, ruin your opponent's day, and then immediately follow up with Embolden, which punishes your opponent for not being able to play their whole hand. Because now that you've set up Embolden, don't you want to protect your aura? That way you can cash it in on the next turn? How are they supposed to punish you for playing Embolden when you have Channel Lake Frigid out?
Oh, I know. You just kept a 4-card hand. You probably had to take a bunch of damage to do that.
Yeah. But you have Channel Lake Frigid out. So, so you might have given them a Frostbite.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's not that bad, especially because we're already playing Channel Lake Frigid in any RL list anyway.
You could also
right?
do like Channel Mount Ison and then a blue plus a Findalls and get this same turn off on a 3-card hand.
Yeah.
Admittedly, a little bit less disruptive.
And you have to run
still
Tunic,
there.
which like in Guardian, there might be other stuff that you want to run.
Yeah, but a lot of Guardians like Tunic. I've definitely heard Guardians are like, well, am I a Tunic Guardian or am I a Tectonic Plating Guardian?
Yeah. So that's what I've been thinking about lately. I saw this combo, Channel Lake Frigid and Embolden, and I was close to building it on Talishar, but you couldn't pry me away from all the editing I've been doing in the last couple weeks. So maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get to maybe like sleeve up Jarl. I don't want to buy a $60 fucking armory deck to put Embolden.
Oh, that's fine. I already did. You can just take it from me.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I would love to do that sometime, maybe at a future armory.
Yeah.
So I brought a copy of Embolden for each of you because I like to do that here on the podcast. One for you and one for you.
Thank you, Fuzzy. And look, it even has your signature on it. I love that. You've been getting so much better at your signature, Fuzzy.
Thanks, Clark. I've been practicing.
Yeah, all these weeks you've been giving us signed cards. It's getting really clean. Consistent too.
Well, thanks for podding with me, boys. I think that's all about we have to say.
Yeah.
I think we've talked enough for one night.
Yeah, I was yapping today.
We be yapping.
But if you have things that you'd like to yap about in our Patreon section, feel free to join us. We talk all about Arsenal Zone stuff. We talk about Crucible stuff. We'll see you there. And until next time, guys, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Pitch It To Me podcast is hosted by Joel Recinos, Clark Moore, and Fuzzy Delp. Our executive producer is Talon Stradley. Our logistics coordinator is John Farkas. Music is produced by Dillon Hulse. Logo is designed by Han V. And our sound mixing is done by Christopher Moore. Last but not least, thank you, the listener, for taking the time to listen to our podcast. Be sure to give us a follow on your favorite social media platform at Pitch It To Me podcast.
I'm Fuzzy.
I'm Clark.
Read the notes! Just kidding.
The notes are with you.
Well, Joel has more credit claim to going second.
Wow. My name is second in the list.
But his is before yours.
But you took his spot.
So I just automatically go
Why
last?
do I get pushed back? 3 resources, gain 6 life, but if you're at death's door, gain 10 life instead.
Jesus.
Because that just becomes the gym leader's super potion, right? It's just like,
that's
yes,
so real.
I've almost killed this fucking dugong. What do you mean? What do you mean it's a full? I just lost 2 Pokemon to this motherfucking dugong.
The dugong call is crazy.
But they only use it when they're at red.